I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, signs of hope. The government shutdown could soon come to an end, why some Democrats are breaking rank, and when things could open back up. A big decision today from the Supreme Court, what it means for same-sex marriage in the U.S. Bishops across the country all go to Baltimore, what lies ahead in this week's plenary assembly. Plus, the wisdom of waiting, what the Pope says is necessary to build a true community of faith. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast of Pope St. Leo the Great. Our top story tonight is day 41 of the government shutdown, but it's likely going to end this week after a rare weekend Senate session on Capitol Hill. Late last night, senators moved forward on a stopgap funding bill to reopen the government through the end of January, combined with 3 other bills to fund certain government departments through 2026. Let's check in with Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales, who joins us to break it all down. Eric.
Well, good evening, Veronica. Yes, we have to remember that this is only the first step. A final vote in the Senate on this funding bill to reopen the government will likely take place either tonight or tomorrow. It would then move over to the House, and if passed there, then it would move on to the president's desk possibly by Friday or this weekend. So that's definitely good news to the millions of people out there who are not receiving a paycheck right now. But a lot of Democrats are raging today because Obamacare subsidies are not included in this deal. There's no guarantee that the House will ever have to take it up. The 8 Democrats, several set to retire, who broke with their party to vote to end the shutdown, claim that their party's strategy wasn't working and it was time.
I understand that not all of my Democratic colleagues are satisfied with this agreement, but waiting another week or another month wouldn't deliver a better outcome.
I expect Republicans to be at the table in the next few weeks. I expect the White House to be at the table. And if they do choose not to come to the table, they can own the disastrous premium increases that will continue to rise.
Here are the major points of the stopgap funding bill. The entire government funded until January 30th, 2026. That includes government workers. It also funds the Department of Agriculture, including SNAP and WIC programs, veteran benefits, military pay, and contractors for all of 2026. And it also reverses mass firings of federal workers during the shutdown and bars future layoffs through January 30th of next year. Democrat Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who crossed party lines, tells me the deal is good for his state's nearly 1 million federal workers and military personnel. The deal requires a vote on Obamacare subsidies by mid-December. Senator Kaine adds it now puts the pressure on Republicans to deal with health care.
If they don't fix this, here's my prediction. They're going to look at last Tuesday's election as a good night compared to what they're going to see next year.
Speaker Mike Johnson says he's thankful a group of Democrats came to their senses.
After 40 days of wandering in the wilderness and making the American people suffer needlessly, some Senate Democrats finally have stepped forward to end the pain. It appears to us this morning that our long national nightmare is finally coming to an end.
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says millions will still be forced to pay astronomical amounts for their Obamacare premiums.
We're not going to support partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. And we're going to continue the fight to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
I want my fellow Democrats to continue the fight for working families so that 20 million of them will not see a doubling of their health insurance premiums under the Affordable Care Act, and 15 million will not be thrown off of health care. Yes, and by the way, I think you're seeing more and more Republicans who understand that they're playing a losing hand.
It is important to note that Speaker Mike Johnson said that he would not commit to holding a vote on Obamacare subsidies, and many Republican fiscal hawks over in the House, well, they say it's a non-starter. So even if the Senate does vote on the bill to bring it before December, it could sit in the House graveyard forever. And another thing, this kicks the can down the road, and could be another funding fight at the end of January. We do want to also let you know on a different note, once House Speaker Mike Johnson brings back the House, he said that he would swear in Arizona Representative Adelita Grijalva. She was the representative who was elected out of Arizona at the end of September, and she's been waiting 7 weeks to be sworn in. She will also be the 218th signature needed to force a House to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. So we'll continue to watch that. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Donald Trump reacts to the news from Capitol Hill that the government shutdown may be coming to an end. And on social media, he insists air traffic controllers return to work immediately. White House correspondent Owen Jensen continues our team coverage. Owen.
Veronica, good evening to you. President Trump's message to air traffic controllers coming up in a moment. But first, the president asked today, late this afternoon in the Oval Office, if he personally approves of the agreement struck on Capitol Hill to end the shutdown.
Well, it depends what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything. And we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
President Donald Trump announces all air traffic controllers must get back to work now. The government shutdown forced them to work without pay.
Today, it benchmarks the first time in history that air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals we represent have now received two $0 paychecks.
President Trump suggests for those air traffic controllers who were great patriots and didn't take any time off for the Democrat shutdown hoax, I will be recommending a bonus of $10,000 per person. But he warns the controllers who stayed home and caused flight delays for those that did nothing but complain and took time off, even though everyone knew they would be paid in full shortly into the future. I am not happy with you. The president even suggests they quit without severance pay, although that would amplify the country's shortage of air traffic controllers.
Controllers continue to show up and step up, despite working full-time during the shutdown and, in many cases, mandatory overtime.
Kevin, how big of a financial hit, have the airlines taken, in your estimation, due to the shutdown?
I haven't seen estimates yet, but it's a serious hit.
President Trump spoke about the government shutdown Sunday when he returned to Washington.
Things are going along very well. Country's doing well. The Democrats have to open it up.
And after swearing in military members at the Commanders game, the president provided another update on the shutdown when he arrived at the White House.
Well, it looks like we're getting very close on the shutdown. We'll never agree to give any substantial money or any money to really prisoners, illegals that come into our country. And I think the Democrats understand that. And it looks like we're getting close to the shutdown ending.
Now, even if the government shutdown ends, air travelers should expect worsening cancellations and delays this week. The FAA is moving ahead with deeper cuts to flights. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Philip Wegman, White House correspondent for Real Clear Politics, joins me now to discuss. Thanks so much for your time. So what were the key political pressures or negotiations that ultimately pushed lawmakers towards ending the shutdown this week?
Well, I think that after the off-year elections, there was a question among many Democrats of what was the purpose of this shutdown. There was obviously the stated purpose of trying to restore these Obamacare subsidies, but they knew that with Republicans in control of both Congress and the White House, that wasn't likely to happen. So as we get to the beginning of the end, the real question here is, was it worth it? Yes, Democrats achieved a historic first, the longest shutdown in American history. But if you take a closer look at the deal that is said to be coming to the finish line here, it's remarkably similar to what Majority Leader Thune offered them in October, a standalone vote on the Affordable Care Act in exchange for opening the government. And it turns out that that's the deal that they took. They're going to get their standalone vote. The government is going to reopen. And so, was it worth it to have all of those military members go without paychecks? Was it worth it for those mothers and children to go hungry? I'm not certain that it actually was. In the end, this was a lot of sound, a lot of fury. But from a policy perspective, nothing significant has changed.
From a strategic standpoint, which party do you think gained leverage during the shutdown, and how might that influence the next round of budget negotiations?
There's going to be another fight, likely in January of next year. I'm not certain that Democratic leadership is going to have the same appetite for this kind of wrangling, but it's clear that Democrats have a civil war on their left flank. California Governor Gavin Newsom said that this was pathetic. Senator Bernie Sanders said that it didn't achieve much of anything at all. If Chuck Schumer thought that he was going to win over progressives by, having this fight with the White House, I think that it was likely short-sighted because they didn't accomplish anything here. Already going into next year's midterms, we knew that Democrats were going to draw a line in the sand on healthcare and say that Republicans didn't have an answer. They didn't move the ball forward in any meaningful way during this shutdown. I think that if anything, Democrats failed to learn the lessons of the Republican shutdown in 2013, where they made a lot of noise, there was a lot of controversy and debate, and then at the end of the day, the party is left pointing fingers at one another and not training their fire on the opposition party. The White House, they're thrilled with this result, and I think that Democrats are left to do some soul searching.
Philip Wegman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today, the Supreme Court rejected to hear an appeal that could have challenged the court's ruling that legalized same-sex marriage. You'll remember 10 years ago in Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court ruled that the right to marry was guaranteed to same-sex couples. Soon after, Kim Davis, a county clerk in Kentucky, refused to issue same-sex marriages. She appealed to the law, but today the Supreme Court rejected that appeal. Joining us now is Tom Jipping, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Tom, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
First, could you walk us through the appeal and what happened at the Supreme Court today?
Well, Kim Davis was a county clerk in Kentucky and refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses. She was dealt with in the legal system and appealed her case to the Supreme Court. Some expected that the Supreme Court would use this case to revisit whether the Constitution protects the right to same-sex marriage. I don't believe this case was suited for that purpose, so I wasn't surprised that the Supreme Court chose not to consider or to review her case.
Now, Kim Davis argued she was exercising her religious liberty. How does the church define the proper boundaries between religious freedom and governmental authority?
Well, I think that the issue here was a little bit narrower than that because she was not acting as a private citizen exercising her right to exercise religion. She was acting as a public official. And the First Amendment applies differently with regard to the actions of public officials than private individuals. So that's what she argued, and I suppose some were hoping that the Supreme Court would look at it that way, but she was acting in her official capacity as a county clerk, and that's a very different legal question.
Are there currently any other cases that could reach the Supreme Court that would reverse Obergefell versus Hodges?
No. One of the reasons why this was not the right case to do that, if you look at the court's decision 3 years ago in Dobbs, which overruled Roe versus Wade, that's a good parallel. In that case, a state passed a law banning abortion that conflicted with the Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade decision, and the Supreme Court then revisited whether Roe versus Wade should stay or go. Here, a legislature would have to do the same thing. You'd have to have a legislature pass a law banning same-sex marriage. That would conflict with the Supreme Court's precedent in Obergefell, and then the Supreme Court would have to decide whether to revisit Obergefell as a precedent. The case involving Kim Davis didn't match any of those characteristics. It wasn't like that at all.
Tom Jipping, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The CEO and News and Director General of the BBC have both resigned after receiving criticism from the way one of Trump's speeches was edited in a documentary. The BBC documentary episode appears to have edited a speech Trump gave on January 6, cutting out the portion of his speech where he says he supports a peaceful demonstration. The Trump administration requests the episode be retracted and threatens to sue the BBC if they do not comply. The chair apologized, calling it an error of judgment. This weekend, U.S. bishops arrived in Baltimore to begin their administrative and committee work before the official start of the plenary assembly, which begins today. The assembly runs through Thursday and will include 2 public sessions that will be live streamed tomorrow and Wednesday. The agenda includes voting for a new president and vice president, as well as discussions on the migrant situation in the U.S., a vote on the budget, and a vote to consecrate the U.S. to the Sacred Heart of Jesus next June. We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Path of destruction. Another major storm hits the Philippines. What we're learning about the damage. And it's not a genocide. The Archbishop of Johannesburg weighs in on President Trump's renewed allegations about what is happening in South Africa. Welcome back. The Philippines has been hit by yet another powerful typhoon, leaving at least 8 people dead and over 1.4 million displaced. Typhoon Fangwang hit the northwestern Philippines last night. Fierce winds of up to 115 miles per hour and rain flooded over 100 northern villages, leaving many residents trapped on their roofs as floodwaters kept rising.
Around a 4-meter huge wave hit and destroyed our house. The water reached further down the road, and it was waist deep here.
4 meters is a little over 13 feet high. The storm left entire provinces without power. This comes as the Philippines is still dealing with damage from last week's typhoon, which left at least 224 people dead. Forecasters say Typhoon Fangwang is now heading towards Taiwan. Police in India's capital say at least 8 people are dead and another 20 hurt after a car exploded near a metro station close to Delhi's historic Red Fort monument. Authorities say a slow-moving vehicle stopped at a red light around 7 p.m. local time before it exploded. Police say there were 3 people in the vehicle at the time of the incident. There is a heavy security presence at the nearby hospital where the injured are being treated, and a number of Delhi's travel sites are put on high alert. The cause of the explosion remains unknown. From India to Rome, where South Africa's president says his meeting with Pope Leo comes at a time when humanity faces immense challenges. But that was only part of Cyril Ramaphosa's message to the pontiff. They also discussed humanitarian aid, climate justice, and peace building. The president said through the G20 presidency, South Africa sees an opportunity to promote solidarity that advances the common good. The G20 summit will be held next week, but the U.S. won't be attending. In a Truth Social post, President Trump wrote, Afrikaners are being killed and slaughtered, and their land and farms are being illegally confiscated. If you remember, back in May, Trump had a dramatic confrontation with the South African leader, making discredited claims that a genocide was taking place against white Afrikaners. In an interview with Cardinal Stephen Brislin, the Archbishop of Johannesburg, Colin Flynn asked him about Trump's claims.
It's a tragic situation because white farmers have been targeted, and it's certainly not a genocide. I mean, we must get through that. It's about crime. There are obviously still racial tensions in South Africa. You can't obliterate all those years of colonialism and separation and apartheid in a single generation. It's something we've got to keep on working at. But it's lovely to see the young people, particularly, who have friends across the color line, and they don't notice the difference in terms of color and culture.
You want them colorblind.
Yeah, exactly. And it's lovely to see them walking along the street, chatting and laughing and just being young people.
I remember being there before in South Africa, Your Eminence, in 2012, and when we were filming in Port Elizabeth, the Windy City.
Oh yes, indeed.
But we spent some time in Johannesburg, and they told us if we were driving and we came to a traffic light, but if you felt unsafe, you were allowed to break the red light. You know, it would be permissible.
That's absolutely correct, and the very sensible thing to do in certain parts of town anyway, and I certainly would do that in Johannesburg in certain parts. I don't particularly like driving at night now in Johannesburg. So it's a general breakdown of the sense of law and order, sense of understanding that the law is there to protect life and to protect other people. So that certainly is one of our biggest problems, is crime. We've got a very high murder rate, gender-based violence, family violence, terribly high rates, a high rate of rape. Accompanying that, of course, is the unemployment rate. I mean, so many young people just can't get work. And that makes the problem much worse because they're on the streets, they're frustrated, they start turning to drink or to drugs, and that just makes the problem much, much bigger. But it's not all negative, and I think it's very important for people to understand that, because we're a young democracy, and the democratic structures are holding out, even though they've been under attack. Most particularly the judiciary has been under attack, but is holding out as an independent body and as part of the whole balance of power. We have freedom of speech, and I can say anything I want to about the president, and I know that I'm not going to be dragged out of my bed at night or something like that. So I think there is very much the positive. It's not all doom and gloom, but we do face enormous problems.
Big challenges.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, the Bishop of Rome, Pope Leo, celebrates the feast of his basilica. Will take you to the Eternal City. Plus, he's the first pope ever to be called the Great. Can you guess who he is? Over the weekend, the Holy Father emphasized the importance of jobs and stability to ensure that young people can realize their dreams and contribute to the common good. He also underscored the wisdom of patience. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Valentina Di Donato has more.
During his Saturday Jubilee audience, Pope Leo XIV warmly greeted the participants taking part in the Jubilee of the World of Work. 45,000 faithful were gathered in St. Peter's Square. In the Holy Father's greeting, spoken in Italian and then in English, he shared how the collective community must cultivate the conditions for professional development of all, in particular young people.
Dear brothers and sisters, as we continue our Jubilee catechesis, let us reflect today on the life of Blessed Isidore Bakanja, a Congolese martyr who lived out his faith with joy and authenticity, even in hostile environments such as his workplace.
Pope Leo XIV gave example of the hostile work environment that also showed the strength of Isidore.
The supervisor of the European-owned plantation where Isidore worked despised the Catholic missionaries who defended the rights of the indigenous and unleashed his anger upon Isidore.
The courage of Isidore acts as an example because despite these unjust work conditions, he expressed his devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary by continuing to wear his brown scapular. While close to death, St. Isidore said he would pray for his aggressors from heaven. On Sunday, the Holy Father celebrated Mass on the occasion of the dedication of the Basilica of St. John Lateran. Pope Leo XIV reflected on the Church, urging the faithful to be free from the criteria of the world, which too often demands immediate results because it does not know the wisdom of waiting.
As we diligently labor in the service of God's kingdom, let us be neither hasty nor superficial. Let us dig deep, unhindered by worldly criteria, which too often demand immediate results and disregard the wisdom of waiting.
The Holy Father says that the two-millennial history of the Church teaches that with God's help, a true community of faithful can be built with humility and patience. And it is the sort of community that is capable of spreading real charity, promoting mission, proclaiming and celebrating the Apostolic Magisterium. In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
Today, the Church celebrates the feast of Pope St. Leo I, known as St. Leo the Great. Pope Leo was born in the 5th century to a Roman aristocratic family. In 440, he was elected unanimously into the papacy. His time as pope was marked by administrative and theological brilliance. In 449, he penned the famous Tome of Leo, which defended the Church's official teaching on Jesus Christ as one person with a divine and human nature that could not be separated. celebrated. The next year, Pope Leo also saved Rome by convincing Attila the Hun to turn his army away from the Eternal City. Leo died in 461, was named a Doctor of the Church by Pope Benedict XIV in 1754, and was the first pope to ever be given the title the Great. Pope St. Leo the Great, pray for us. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.